In the ancient city of Ur, surrounded by towering ziggurats and idol worship, lived a man who would make a decision so radical, so earth-shattering, that it would change the course of human history forever. His name was Abram, and God was about to ask him to do the unthinkable. Abraham was 75 years old, wealthy, established, with deep family roots spanning generations. Then suddenly, a voice breaks through the silence, the voice of the Almighty God himself. The message? Leave everything, your country, your people, your father's house. Go to a land I will show you. But here's where it gets interesting. God didn't just ask Abram to leave. He made him a promise so audacious, so seemingly impossible, that it defied all logic. I will make you into a great nation, God declared. I will bless you and make your name great. All peoples on earth will be blessed through you. But this promise seemed absolutely impossible. Abram was childless. His wife Sarai was barren. At 75 years old, how could he possibly become the father of a great nation? But Abram did something that would define his legacy forever. He believed. He packed up everything and left for the unknown. As Abram's caravan disappeared into the desert horizon, he had no idea that ahead of him lay tests that would shake him to his very core. Famine would drive him to desperate measures. Kings would threaten everything he held dear. And God would ask him to do something so unthinkable that it would test the very limits of human faith. The promised land of Canaan should have been paradise. Instead, Abram arrived to find a famine. Severe famine. The irony was crushing. God had led him to a land that couldn't even sustain life. Desperation drove Abram south to Egypt, but terror gripped his heart. Sarai was so beautiful that he feared the Egyptians would kill him to take her, so he made a decision that nearly cost him everything. He told everyone she was his sister. When Pharaoh saw Sarai's beauty, he took her into his palace, showering Abram with wealth, sheep, cattle, donkeys, camels, servants. Abram was rich beyond measure, but at what cost? Then something happened that changed everything. Plagues began striking Pharaoh's household, terrible plagues. And somehow, Pharaoh discovered the truth. Pharaoh confronted Abram with fury in his eyes. The deception was exposed. Abram's life was at risk. But what happened next would prove that God's protection over his chosen vessel was absolute and unshakable. Expelled from Egypt but enormously wealthy, Abram returned to Canaan with his nephew Lot. But prosperity brought an unexpected problem. Their combined flocks and herds were so vast that the land couldn't support them both. Tension escalated. Arguments erupted between their herdsmen. The family that had journeyed together was now fracturing apart. Abram faced a choice that would reveal the true depth of his character. Instead of claiming his right as the elder, Abram offered Lot first choice of the land. If you go left, I'll go right. If you go right, I'll go left. Lot's eyes fell upon the Jordan Valley, lush, green, well-watered like the Garden of Eden. Without hesitation, he chose the best for himself, leaving Abram with the hill country. But Lot had no idea that his choice would lead him toward a city so wicked that God himself was planning its destruction. After Lot departed, something remarkable happened. God appeared to Abram again with a renewed promise that seemed even more impossible than before. Look around you, God commanded. All the land you see, north, south, east, west, I will give to you and your offspring forever. I will make your offspring like the dust of the earth. The promise was expanding, but the problem remained the same. Abram was still childless. How could his offspring be like dust when he had no children? Yet something was different this time. God wasn't finished. Suddenly, war erupted in the region. 5 kings fought against 4, and in the chaos, Lot was captured along with all his possessions. When word reached Abram, he faced a moment of truth. Would he risk everything to save the nephew who had selfishly chosen the best land for himself? Abram's response revealed a warrior's heart none had suspected. With only 318 trained men, Abram pursued armies of thousands. The odds were impossible. The enemy was ruthless. But what happened in the darkness of that night would become the stuff of legends. After his stunning victory, as Abram returned with Lot and all the recovered goods, he encountered a mysterious figure, Melchizedek, king of Salem, priest of God Most High. This enigmatic king blessed Abram and received a tithe from him, but his words carried a weight that suggested this meeting was far more significant than it appeared. Who was this priest king? And why did this encounter feel like a glimpse into something eternal? The king of Sodom approached with an offer that glittered like gold. "Give me the people, but keep all the goods for yourself." It was a fortune beyond imagination. Abram could have become the wealthiest man in the region, but his response would reveal something profound about his character and his relationship with God. Abram refused the king's offer, but afterward, fear crept into his heart. He had made powerful enemies. What if they returned for revenge? Then, in the darkness of night, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision. But what God showed him next would fill him with a terror unlike anything he had ever experienced. "Do not be afraid, Abram. I am your shield, your very great reward." But Abram's response was raw, desperate. "What can you give me since I remain childless?" God's answer shattered the night sky. "Look up at the stars and count them. If indeed you can count them, so shall your offspring be." Then came the most solemn moment in human history. God made a covenant with Abram, but the ritual was unlike anything ever seen. As Abram fell into a deep sleep, a thick and dreadful darkness came over him. And in that darkness, God revealed a future so terrible, so filled with suffering, that it would span 400 years. "Your descendants will be strangers in a country not their own, and they will be enslaved and mistreated." But that wasn't the end of the vision. Something else was coming that would change everything. 10 years passed. The promise remained unfulfilled. Sarai was now 75, Abram 85. The biological window was rapidly closing. Then Sarai made a suggestion that seemed logical, but would unleash consequences beyond imagination. "Sleep with my servant Hagar. Perhaps I can build a family through her." It was a decision that would create conflict lasting to this very day. When Hagar conceived, everything changed. The servant girl looked upon her barren mistress with contempt. Sarai's heart burned with jealousy and rage. The household that had known peace was now a battlefield of bitter emotions, and in the middle of it all stood Abram, torn between two women, watching his family disintegrate. Unable to bear Sarai's harsh treatment, Hagar fled into the wilderness, carrying Abram's unborn child. Death seemed certain in the desert wasteland. But by a spring of water, something miraculous happened. An angel of the Lord appeared to her with a message that would echo through the ages. Hagar returned and gave birth to Ishmael. Abram was now 86, finally a father. But this child, though beloved, was not the child of promise. And 13 years of silence from God were about to end with the most shocking revelation yet. When Abram was 99 years old, physically unable to father children, God appeared again. But this time, everything was different. The promise became shockingly specific. God changed his name from Abram to Abraham, father of many nations, and Sarai to Sarah, princess. Then came the announcement that seemed like divine mockery. "Sarah will bear you a son, and you will call him Isaac." By this time next year, Sarah will have a son. Abraham fell face down and laughed. Sarah, listening at the tent entrance, also laughed. A 100-year-old man and a 90-year-old woman having a baby. It was biologically impossible. But God's response to their laughter would reveal something profound about the nature of divine power. Near the great trees of Mamre, as Abraham sat in the heat of the day, he saw 3 men approaching. Something about them was different, otherworldly. Abraham rushed to show them hospitality, but he had no idea that one of these visitors was about to make an announcement that would change his life forever. As Sarah prepared food, she overheard the visitor's words, I will surely return to you about this time next year, and Sarah, your wife, will have a son." Sarah laughed to herself in disbelief, but the visitor's response sent chills down her spine. "Is anything too hard for the Lord?" Sarah was terrified. This wasn't just any man, this was the Lord himself. As the visitors prepared to leave, the Lord revealed their destination, Sodom and Gomorrah. The outcry against these cities was so great that God had come to investigate personally. Abraham's blood ran cold. Lot was in Sodom. But what happened next revealed the heart of a man who dared to argue with God himself. "Will you sweep away the righteous with the wicked?" Abraham challenged. What followed was the most audacious negotiation in history. Abraham bargained with the Almighty. 50 righteous people, then 45, then 40, 30, 20. Finally, 10. If just 10 righteous people could be found, God would spare the cities. But when morning came, the sky told a different story. Smoke rose from the cities like the smoke of a furnace. Sodom and Gomorrah were utterly destroyed. But what about Lot? Had Abraham's intercession been enough to save his nephew? The answer lay in the dramatic events of the previous night, when 2 angels had to physically drag Lot and his family from the doomed city. As fire and brimstone rained from heaven, the angels gave one command: don't look back. But Lot's wife couldn't resist. She looked back at the burning cities and instantly became a pillar of salt. Meanwhile, Abraham stood watching the destruction from afar, not knowing whether his prayers had been answered. A year passed, and then it happened. The impossible became reality. Sarah, at 90 years old, gave birth to Isaac. Laughter. The child of promise had finally arrived. Abraham's joy knew no bounds. But ahead lay a test so severe that it would require him to choose between his beloved son and his faith in God. At Isaac's weaning celebration, Sarah witnessed something that filled her with rage. Ishmael, now a teenager, was mocking her son. The demand she made was brutal and heartbreaking. "Get rid of that slave woman and her son. The slave woman's son will never share in the inheritance with my son, Isaac." Abraham was torn apart. Ishmael was also his son, his firstborn, his beloved child. Early the next morning, with tears streaming down his face, Abraham gave Hagar food and water and sent her away with Ishmael into the desert. As they disappeared into the wilderness, Abraham couldn't know that God had plans for Ishmael too, plans that would make him the father of a great nation. Years passed peacefully. Isaac grew strong and beloved. Abraham's heart was completely bound up in this miracle child. Then one day, God spoke again. But the words that came would test Abraham in ways no human being had ever been tested. "Take your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and sacrifice him as a burnt offering on the mountain I will show you." The command was incomprehensible. Isaac was the child of promise, the one through whom all God's promises would be fulfilled. How could God ask Abraham to kill him? But Abraham's response would reveal a faith so pure, so absolute, that it would become the standard for all generations. Early the next morning, Abraham rose and began the longest journey of his life. For 3 days, he walked toward Mount Moriah, Isaac beside him, the knife and fire in his hands. What thoughts tormented his mind during those 3 days? How did he look at his beloved son, knowing what lay ahead? As they climbed the mountain together, Isaac asked the question that must have pierced Abraham's heart like a sword. "Father, where is the lamb for the burnt offering?" Abraham's answer revealed either the deepest faith or the most heartbreaking deception ever uttered. "God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, my son." But when they reached the top of the mountain, there was no lamb in sight. Abraham built the altar. He arranged the wood. He bound Isaac and laid him on the altar. Isaac, the miracle child, the beloved son, the child of promise, lay helpless before his father. Abraham raised the knife. His hand trembled. Everything. God's promises, his son's life, his own sanity. Just as Abraham's hand began its downward arc, a voice thundered from heaven. "Abraham, Abraham, do not lay a hand on the boy." But the voice continued with words that would echo through eternity. "Now I know that you fear God, because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son." Abraham looked up and saw something that took his breath away. Caught in a thicket by its horns was a ram, God's provision, just as Abraham had promised Isaac. As the ram burned on the altar instead of his son, Abraham named the place, "The Lord will provide." But God wasn't finished. The angel called out again with a promise so magnificent it would reshape human history. "By myself I have sworn," declared the Lord, "because you have done this and have not withheld your son, your only son, I will surely bless you and make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and as the sand on the seashore." But there was more, something that extended far beyond Abraham himself. "Through your offspring all nations on earth will be blessed, because you have obeyed me." This wasn't just about Abraham anymore. This was about the salvation of the entire world. Years later, when Isaac was 40, Abraham realized his son needed a wife. But not just any wife. She had to be from his own people, not from the Canaanites. So Abraham entrusted his oldest servant with the most important mission imaginable: find a wife for Isaac. The servant's journey would involve divine signs, extraordinary faith, and a young woman whose response would change everything. At a well outside the city of Nahor, Abraham's servant prayed for a sign. "May it be that when I say to a young woman, 'Please let down your jar that I may have a drink,' and she says, 'Drink, and I'll water your camels too,' let her be the one you have chosen for your master's son." Before he had finished praying, a beautiful young woman approached. Her name was Rebecca. What happened next would prove that God was orchestrating every detail. The servant asked for water, and Rebecca not only gave him a drink but offered to water all his camels, exactly the sign he had prayed for. But as he watched her pour jar after jar of water for his 10 thirsty camels, a task that would take enormous effort, he could hardly believe what was happening. Was this really God's chosen bride for Isaac? When the camels finished drinking, the servant brought out gifts of gold, a nose ring, and bracelets of stunning beauty and value. Rebecca's response to his questions about her family would determine whether this miraculous encounter was truly from God. "Whose daughter are you?" the servant asked. Rebecca's answer sent shivers down his spine. "I am the daughter of Bethuel, the son of Nahor and Milcah." Nahor, Abraham's brother. God had led him directly to Abraham's own family. The servant bowed down and worshipped, but the real test was just beginning. At Rebecca's house, the servant told the entire story: Abraham's wealth, Isaac's miraculous birth, the divine guidance that led him there. Then came the moment of truth. "Will you go with this man?" Rebecca's response would determine the future of God's covenant people. Would she leave everything she knew to marry a man she had never met? Rebecca said yes. She left her family and traveled to Canaan to meet her destiny. When Isaac saw her approaching from a distance, it was love at first sight. He took her into his mother Sarah's tent, and she became his wife. But the story of Abraham was drawing to a close, and his final act would reveal the complete transformation of a man who had started his journey with such imperfect faith. Abraham lived to be 175 years old, blessed beyond measure. He saw Isaac married and established. He witnessed the beginning of the fulfillment of God's promises. When he breathed his last, he died in peace, knowing that the covenant would continue through Isaac. But his legacy was far greater than he could have imagined. Abraham became exactly what God promised, the father of many nations. Through Isaac came the nation of Israel. Through Ishmael came the Arab peoples. But the greatest fulfillment of God's promise was yet to come. Through Abraham's lineage would come the one who would bless all nations, Jesus Christ, the ultimate seed of Abraham. The man who left Ur in faith, who believed God's impossible promises, who was willing to sacrifice his only son, became the father of faith for all who believe. His story proves that God can take an ordinary person and use them to change the world if they're willing to trust him completely, even when his promises seem impossible. Abraham's journey from doubt to perfect faith shows us that no matter how impossible God's promises may seem, no matter how long we have to wait, no matter what he asks us to sacrifice, God is always faithful. He is still the God who provides. He is still the God of the impossible. And he is still looking for people like Abraham, ordinary people willing to take extraordinary steps of faith. The question remains, if God called you to leave everything behind and trust him with the impossible, would you have the faith of Abraham? The same God who spoke to Abraham is speaking still. If you watch this video to the end, please subscribe for more stories of the Bible. Leave a like and share with someone today.